Hello and welcome to Gaming Blind, where I, a blind gamer, play video games and see how accessible they are to people like me. My name is Dom, and this video is a little bit different because we're not going to discuss and review a video game and its accessibility, but rather we are going to discuss and demo a texture pack I made for Minecraft, specifically the Blind Accessible Pack, also known as the Blind Accessibility Pack or the B.A.P. Now, if you are a loyal follower or subscriber of my channel, I do want to apologize for not uploading so frequently recently, but I will discuss why at the end of the video because I don't want to bore you with unimportant stuff, and this is not the video about that. Hi, just before this video does start though, I would like to mention a few things. Thing number one, I recorded this video at around 2 AM in the morning, so, well, 2 AM, obviously in the morning. So I sound very tired, very stressful, and I do a lot of mistakes. I tried my very best to delete every silence, every stutter that happened during my recording, so if you find one, I'm sorry, I tried my best to remove it. A few notes regarding that exhaustion and tiredness. I mention green stuff in the video, but instead of saying green, I say grey, so be mindful of that. Whenever I say grey, I most likely mean green. Also, very often, if I say high texture, I most likely mean high contrast. I was very tired, so I wasn't even concentrating on what I was saying, I was just trying to make this video as short as possible. It's still 1 hour and 40 minutes, so sorry, but I do hope the video helps. Speaking of which, because the video is so long and if you just want to watch a certain part, you can find timestamps and the specific sections of the video within the description below the video and in the video progress bar, so I hope that helps. Okay, so I hope the video helps, I hope you enjoy it, and back to the video. So before we start, you may or may not know what a texture is, whether you're blind or not, whether you're a gamer or not. So what is a texture? If you can look at the screen, you can notice that certain parts and things in the game have different colors and graphics. Well, that is what a texture does. A texture is a graphic, an image that basically fills a thing inside a video game to make it look how it does. Now, Minecraft is rather special when it comes to textures because it has an option to upload a custom texture which you can use to make the game look different, either slightly or massively. Now, if you're talented enough, you can even make your own texture to upload on the internet for other people to download and enjoy themselves. If you haven't seen the accessibility review of Minecraft, which I uploaded 2 videos ago, I highly recommend checking it out. But if you have, then you know how accessible, or rather how not so accessible, Minecraft is. I explain how most severely sight-impaired people can play the game, but with major difficulties. And I also explained that the reason I made this texture pack is for exactly that. To help them, to help blind gamers, severely sight-impaired gamers, and myself. So, without further ado, I present the B.A.P, the Blind Accessible Pack. Now, how is this, my texture pack, different from the other texture packs? Well, my texture pack focuses on making every item, block, mob, whatever, higher contrast, simpler, and easier to see in the game. However, I must let you know now that I did make this texture by myself and did not have any help from any professional or anyone who knew better than me. So I did try my best to make the texture to help as many people as possible, but it still can be better if someone else could help me. So if you or somebody you know is talented enough with programming or making textures, I highly recommend you contacting me via my business email found on my channel or by commenting down below, and I will do my best to contact you myself. If you feel like you're satisfied with the brief description I gave of the texture pack, you can check the description of the video below to see the link to the official page where you can download these appropriate files. However, if you would However, if you would like to know more about the texture pack and how it works, then I welcome you to this video. In this video, I will explain most things about the texture pack so you know if it's accessible to you or not and how it works. So, let's begin. Right now, I am in the normal Minecraft, but we can press the menu button. And as you can see, if you still have limited sight, you can notice that I have F1 pressed, so the hotbar and such things are disabled so you can see things better when I try to explain. But we will press escape and we will press save and quit to title so I can actually show you from the start what I have changed. We will go to options, we will go to resource packs, and when it loads we have on top the blind accessibility pack version 1.1.2. so this is the version for Minecraft 1.16.5, I believe, which is the current version of Minecraft I'm playing. And currently I would like you to also know that this texture pack is only available for Minecraft Java Edition. It's not available for Bedrock because I'm still trying to figure out how to convert the texture pack and how to upload it to the marketplace for Minecraft Bedrock users to enjoy. Again, if you'd like to help with that, I highly recommend contacting me, and thank you so much if you do. Anyway, we will press the arrow key on top of the icon for the texture pack. That will move the texture pack to the selected section where we will then press done at the bottom and it will load the texture pack. Now, when it loads, you will see the changes right away. So the texture pack has just loaded and you can see from the get-go, that's the first time you use that word, but from the get-go you can notice the background first of all. The original was a 12 by 12 dirt block, which is basically the dirt block in the game used as the background, and it's basically looped all over the background so you can see it all over the screen. This is also all over the screen, but instead of the dirt being 12 by 12, it is 4 by 4, which makes it easy to see if you're actually interested in looking at the dirt block texture. The buttons also look different because, as you saw before, all of the buttons were grey. And when you selected them or hovered with the mouse on top of them, you wouldn't really know if they were selected or not because they also were low texture when compared to the unselected buttons. Now, how can you know if you are hovering over a button now? So, I have my mouse here, I'm moving it, don't know if you can see it properly, but it's on the top right. And I will be hovering on the top button on the top right. So it's currently black, I will hover on it and it's now blue. So the black changes to blue and that is a high contrast, which basically lets you see it easier. So black on white means that it's not highlighted. When you hover over it, it's blue and white, which means you are hovering your mouse on top of the button. That also makes it simpler and easier to find your mouse and the button itself. I'd also like to point out that I wish I could also change the textures of the font, but I'm not talented enough to do that. So as you can see, the font is still a little bit hard to see. But if there was someone who could help me out with that, again, please contact me and it will be very useful. But anyway, let's click done. Now you can also see, if you noticed before in the original game, the Minecraft logo was a little bit more detailed and there was like loads of cracks, it was a bit darker, and you could also notice that there was no Java, well there was, it said Java Edition, but it was also grey and much smaller, so it was harder to see. Now, the Minecraft logo is similar, I basically copied the Bedrock edition onto this one, making it more visible and simpler to read. The Java edition is also, instead of being a blocky grey small text, it's now an Arial and it's now yellow, so it's easier to read, sorry. The yellow jumping text on the right of the logo is called a text splash, and it's different each time you load up a Minecraft menu. There's a very large list of the text splashes, so it could be different. There's like hundreds of them, but I also changed the types of text splashes, where I basically added some specific text splashes to do with this texture pack, and I also removed any long text splashes, text splashes which would make the text small. You can notice that in the original game the background of the menu moved from right to left from right to left as the camera panned over a certain terrain in the game. Now, to make it simpler to see, it is a Minecraft world, but it's an image that doesn't move and it's blurred, so it's easier to see the actual options in the main menu. On the bottom right and left, you can also see two square buttons. The right one is the accessibility button, and the left one is the language button. The right one I changed only slightly from grey to white, and when you hover over the button, the black changes to blue, which basically means that you're hovering over it. The language button is also simpler to see now, because the previous one in the original game was a globe icon, which is hard to see and hard to notice that it's the languages button. Now it's a foreign character, which obviously means that it's the languages section. So if you click it, it goes to the languages options. We will go on single player and we'll select a world. We will click the B.A.P texture demo because that's the world that I will be explaining the demo, but I would like you to notice the arrow on the icon. The arrow, basically what it does is it signifies which world you're hovering on, and as you can see it is grey. But when you hover on it, the edges turn into white, the outline, and the inside turns into a dark grey, which means you're hovering on it, so it's easy to see. The grayed out buttons at the bottom are also simpler to see, and notice that they're grayed out because the ungrayed buttons are solid black, and you can actually see that they turn to blue when you hover on them. But we'll go to the B.A.P texture demo, and we'll show you I'll show you the actual texture pack. So this is me, and this is the world that I will be showing you. Looks like Minecraft. It's obvious that it's Minecraft from afar, but we'll get close and I'll actually explain to you each and every bit. Inventory. So the inventory, you click E to turn it on. And you can also notice that now the edges are black. It's easier to navigate now. You can see that the black edges are on top, and you can differentiate by the grid. In the original, they were grey, along with the background of the inventory, which is also grey. Now it's a higher contrast, so you can see where the actual grid is and where the boxes are. Your actual hotbar within your inventory has blue edges, which is also easier to navigate with now. I have made the background of where your skin is a gradient of grey with red outline, so it's easier to spot and see when you have armor on. But again, I will need to see the opinions of other people when more actually use it, so I can either keep it or change it later on. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to show you the accessibility of a tool called Optifine. Now, Optifine is sort of a mod, but then it's not. It's more of a tool for Minecraft, and it's not just for blind people, but it's very helpful. What Optifine does is it gives you much more settings for performance and graphics within the game. So you can either, for example, turn the animations off for certain things like fire, water, if that makes it more accessible for you. You can also turn off certain things, combine certain textures. You can do various things. You can turn off smoke, turn off the sun, you can turn off the sky to make your FPS larger. But my personal favorite of this tool is the zoom feature. When you have Optifine installed, you can hold Z to zoom in, and that's really helpful when you're out and about in the game. You can zoom in and it helps a lot. So let's go to the first thing in our demo, which is the very first thing you see in the game if you're a new player. That is the grass and the grass path. So in the original game, grass has a pixelated grass color, and it is different shades of a 12 by 12 grid, different shades of grey. Now, when you try to look at grass, it's grey. Why am I jumping automatically? You can see it's grey. It still has different pixels, but it's shaped differently. So you can sort of notice there's small straight lines, but then there's also bigger pixels. And that basically is what grass looks like within the texture pack. Grass paths, on the other hand, have a lighter grey, and they also have darker dots around them. So that is what the grass path looks like, and you can differentiate easily between normal grass and grass paths. When grass is covered by snow, you can see that the grass looks normal, and when it's covered by snow, it's white. So not only the top turns white, but also the edges and the sides of where the grass is are also white. Dirt is also now simpler to see, as it is a simpler texture. It's not 12 by 12, I think it's 8 by 8, which basically means that there's less pixels and making it easier to see, and it's a smaller strain for the eyes. Back to the grass, you can also see that the same is happening with the dirt itself on the side of the grass. So it's also a simpler texture with a simpler side of the grass, where you can also see the outline of the grass itself. It's more darker, whereas in the original game it was the same color as the grass itself, so you wouldn't be able to see where it starts and where it ends, for instance. And again, when the grass is covered by snow, it turns white, and you can clearly see the outline. Well, you might not really be able to see the outline because it's kind of grey, but that's because you already see the contrast between the snow and the dirt, which is much darker than the snow itself. Now, in Minecraft, there's different types of dirt. There's the normal dirt, then there's the coarse dirt, which is used for something else. Coarse dirt is different with its looks than normal dirt, because it is still 12 by 12, and it's also a higher contrast. So here the normal dirt has a more browny color, whereas here it's still brown, but it's more contrasty, which means it's more dark and white altogether. Podzol looks similar or even the same to the normal game. I don't think I really changed it because it's unique by itself. If you see the dirt next to Podzol, you can see that it is Podzol based on the shape of the dirt, how dirt looks. It looks normal, and the top itself, it looks kind of like a swampy kind of texture. However, I did change the texture of mycelium, where it gives the vibes of the side and the top of the normal grass. When you look at the side, it has the dark outline, and on top, if you stand on it, it is kind of like a frosty texture. It did look similar to ice when I was making it, so I also added certain little lines to make it differentiate from ice. But when walking on it, if you actually have the sound turned all the way up, you can actually kind of recognize whether you're on ice or not, because ice sounds more like glass when you walk on top of it because of its solid texture. I also forgot to show you the block breaking. So when you break a block in Minecraft, you kind of see a little like cracks going bigger and bigger the more you mine something. So here I have a diamond block, and you can see that the main part of the crack is black, but around it it's white edges. That's because when I mine a bright block, you can clearly see it. You just mine it, it's mined. But for something like an obsidian, which is dark, the white bits make the crack a little easier to see. You can't really see the crack because it's still a bit hard, but you can see that things are moving here and there when you actually mine the block. So you see things changing on the actual block, and we have mined the blocks, so you saw that you were actually mining them. In survival Minecraft, farming is very important, and to do farming you need water, dirt, and a hoe, which is a tool to farm stuff. In the game, water can interact with dirt, but not currently. So see, there's water which is blue and dirt right next to it, which is normal. You can see it normally just like the normal dirt. It doesn't change, you can't see any difference. It's dirt. However, if you use a hoe, and if you hoe a dirt block which is next to water, the dirt will turn into farmland, which you can now see the difference in. It's basically now darker, and it has kind of rough lines on them where you actually hoed. Now you know that you can actually put seeds on or something to grow on top of your farmland. Very commonly you can encounter sand within the game. So what I've done with sand is I either copied and pasted a normal texture of normal sand from real life, or I multiplied the texture from 12 to like, I don't know, 64. This makes it more grainy, and because it's more grainy, it should be easy to spot that it is sand. Because sand is one of the very few blocks that is so grainy, you can recognize that it is sand. There's also an orangey block that looks similar. It's also very grainy, but it's more orange. That's because it's red sand. So you can differentiate between red sand and normal sand. Sand is more yellow, red sand is more orangey or red. What I've done with the stone is something similar to what I've done with the top of the grass texture, where I basically stretched it a little to the right, making kind of like pixel lines. Now because there's pixel lines, you can differentiate the grass from the stone and the stone from other blocks, as it is one of the very few textures that have this pattern. Cobblestone also looks very different from normal stone because now it has more distinct outlines. See, the stone has no outlines like that. Cobblestone does. And I tried making the shades a little bit similar to the original texture, but again I still wanted it to be as accessible as possible. So the outlines are now less shady, but the insides, the actual rocks, still have some shades to actually keep the game look. Now already you may notice that this texture pack is ugly, and I know it is. Some people actually like certain textures within this texture pack, but some don't. I, for example, hate the look of the cobblestone, but I did make this texture pack for it to make it easier for blind gamers to play the game, not for the looks themselves. So if the texture looks bad to you, while I tried making things pretty and keeping things as nice looking as possible, the main aim of this project was to make things simpler to see for blind gamers. Okay, a very similar texture to cobblestone in the original game is mossy cobblestone, which, if you can't see, is very difficult to differentiate. Now it is not. It still looks the same, it still has the same shapes of the stone as in the cobblestone, but it's now dark grey. It has dark grey edges, dark grey outlines, which compared to the cobblestone, now you can differentiate. Now we will move on to stone bricks. So stone bricks are made in a similar style to the cobblestone, where the outlines are a higher texture. So as you can see, the outlines of the actual bricks are darker than the bricks themselves. So now you can know which sort of brick you are looking at. This is a grey brick with dark grey outlines, so it must be a stone brick. Similarly, a mossy stone brick looks similar, but it is grey in texture, and the edges are thicker. So see, in the original they're thinner and grey, now they are thicker and green. So that's how you know you are looking at mossy stone bricks. Cracked stone bricks are similar to the original stone bricks, but they have a higher contrast and they have dark cracks. And this is how you differentiate between normal stone bricks and the cracked ones. And the chiseled stone bricks, I don't think I changed, because in themselves they are already very hard to not differentiate. They're easy to differentiate between the normal stone bricks and the chiseled ones, because it just is mainly dark squares within squares, so it's easy to spot. I've done a similar thing to sandstone, so the edges and the outlines of the sandstone are very similar to the cobblestone, but the way you differentiate the cobblestone and the sandstone is you can see the colors, so the normal sandstone being yellow and the red sandstone being red, but you can also differentiate by the top of the sandstone, which is smooth. Cobblestone, as you can see right now, doesn't have that. All of the block has outlines of the rocks. Sandstone has a smooth bit at the top. And they've done similar things to the chiseled sandstone, so it has a different shape depending on the color and the type of the chiseled block. So this is a wither, which is on the red sandstone. This is a creeper head, which is on the normal sandstone, and on the chiseled stone brick you can see just normal squares. Cut sandstone is also easy to spot, as it is a kind of like an upside down L on the edges of the block, and it's also high in contrast, similar to the previous blocks like the stone bricks. In a rare case where you stumble upon bedrock, which is very hard to stumble upon in survival because it's at the very bottom of the world, you can also see the difference between any other block, because bedrock is more like a staticky kind of mesh, and it's a different pattern depending on what block you see. All of these are bedrocks, but each face a different direction. This is similar to andesite, diorite and granite, but instead of each block facing a different direction, they face the same direction. So, for example, andesite moves kind of from the bottom left corner to the top right. However, the types of blocks themselves are different, slightly. If you look close, you can notice that all of these textures, the diorite, granite and andesite, are all the same. But the andesite is grey in colour, diorite is white in colour and it has a different direction, and similarly granite is also directed differently and is red. When you polish the blocks, you get polished andesite, diorite and granite, and they turn out like this. This is polished granite, this is polished diorite, and this is polished andesite. So each are kind of like blurs of the unpolished ones, but with a outline which is like a solid outline color. I recently did find a problem though with the polished granite, and the problem is that it does look very similar to an upcoming block, the copper block, So in the future I might change the texture of the polished granite, or I might keep that and just make the copper block a little bit different. If you're a blind Minecraft player, you know how extremely difficult it is to find ores within caves. Now, you don't really have to worry about that. It's much easier now. This is what the coal ore looks like. This is what the iron ore looks like. Gold ore, redstone ore, lapis lazuli ore, diamond ore, emerald ore, and the gold ore in the nether. Now you can see clearly what the difference is between the original game. In the original game, each ore had the stone as the background, but the actual ore was the same apart from the color. They all had the same shape. Now you can differentiate the ores by looking at the outline of the ore itself, which is the color of the ore, a solid color, and the inside of the texture, which is the texture of the actual material within the ore. And if you look at the outline of the actual item, there's also a white kind of outline, so you see the high contrast. So this is the coal ore. Another difference is between the gold ore and the iron ore, because some people might not recognize the difference between the iron ore and the gold ore because of the similar bright colors. Now you can, because the iron ore is facing right, whereas the gold ore is facing left. Similarly, the gold ore within the nether is also facing left, so it's easier to spot. And if you choose to make the respectful blocks out of these materials, here is the results. This is a coal block, so it looks the same, except it's a little more high contrasty, with a C that is also high contrast but also not too visible, which makes it easier and nicer looking. This is an iron block, which has a solid outline, but with like lines in the middle to make it differentiate from the polished diorite. A gold block also has a solid outline. The redstone block is high contrast and it has a solid outline, but it's brighter than the inside. Lapis lazuli blocks have a dark solid outline. Similarly, diamond blocks are bright blue, but they also have a dark outline around them. Emerald blocks look similar to the original, but they also have the inside kind of like polished. So I also made the insides with an outline. And I also forgot to mention the quartz ores within the nether also have a significant and specific texture. Now it's easier to see because in the dark red netherworld, these are easy to see because the quartz is white, meaning that the outline of the ore is also white. I didn't really change the glass and stained glass, so this is the stained glass. That is because glass and stained glass are made to look like that because they are glass. They're meant to look like they do. So I didn't change them too much. I don't even think I changed them at all. But these are what the glass look like. These are what the normal glass looks like, and the glass panes. But when it comes to iron bars, I did change the outlines. So the outlines are much darker, so you can now see where the iron bars end and where they start. Now to make iron bars, if you wish to make them, this is where the tools come in. Each tool I also made high contrast. This is the stone cutter, which has dark outlines to signify that it is a stone cutter. The stone cutters have a certain animation, which I also tried to putting high contrast onto. I don't know if it's visible for the that it's an animation, but it should be easier to spot now that it is a high contrast texture. The grindstone looks different because the bottom has dark textures, dark contrasts, and the edges around the actual stone itself are also high in texture. High in contrast, I mean, sorry. Why do I keep saying that? Similarly, the fletching table, they're also high high contrast. The tools that are on the actual table I made easier to see by putting outlines on top of them and around them. The cartography tables are also a high contrast, especially the sides, which I made for the tables to actually be differentiating from other blocks and easy to spot. Similar to the fletching table, I also changed the smithing table where I basically made the sides a little simpler to see. So see, the tools on the sides are easy to spot because the backgrounds aren't too dark anymore. The furnace is also quite cool. It kind of looks similar, but I did turn the top to the texture of the cobblestone, and I made the sides simpler to see. So instead of the different kind of shades, I made most colors a simple single color. Now within the actual furnace, you can see that the holes are black. That means that nothing is cooking inside. But if we take out some raw chicken and some coal, we can put it inside the furnace, and we'll talk about the furnace now. The inside also looks different because in the original you have 3 boxes. On top you put what you want to cook, at the bottom you put what you cook with, so the fuel, and the result comes in the right box. Between the 2 boxes on the left and the 1 box on the right is an arrow, which is low contrast in the original game, and below and on top of the 2 boxes on the left is a fire, which is also very low contrast in the original. But now if we put a raw chicken on top and we put coal at the bottom, look what happens between the 2 top and bottom boxes. There's 3 bars which are yellow and red at the bottom. That signifies fire, and the more black the 3 bars are, the less fuel you have to cook the food. The arrow is also high contrast now because as you saw, it was white when it was like a progress bar, but black when it finished cooking. So now we have cooked chicken. You can also see that the textures of the inside, the holes, aren't black anymore, but there's fire at the bottom, and the top also looks kind of more brighter. These similar things happens with the smoker. We can put some raw chicken and some coal inside, and if you look, it's kind of like brighter now. But if we put the raw chicken on top and the coal at the bottom, the outside gets darker, but the holes get brighter, and the fire itself also moves a little faster. Blast furnace, same thing. You put some iron ores inside with some coal, and if you look at the texture now, it's a bit bright. If we click the blast furnace, we will cook we'll smelt the iron ore. And now, as you can see, it got much darker, but the inside turned yellow, which signifies that there's a fire. When it finishes smelting, it's going to turn into the original texture, which is much brighter. Oh, but the fuel is lowering slowly, so you can see the texture change in 3, 2, 1, and it changed. So there you go. That's the difference between when it's actually cooking and when it's not. Other tools include the chest, which also has much less shades now and has mostly outlines which are solid colors. Inside you can also see the grid, which I previously mentioned is big on top and it has black outlines. Similarly, the small chest also has black outlines around the boxes, but because it's a small chest, it has less of them. The anvil also has dark edges, So this is a normal anvil, classic anvil that's new. A slightly broken anvil has a slight crack at the top, and you can clearly see it because it has a dark crack on a less busy texture now. But if it looks like this, that means it's heavily damaged and it needs replacing. The crafting table is also now very simple to see, as it's not too busy within the background. It is basically just simple planks with tools on top and a very high texture. This is probably the easiest block you'll be able to see within the game with the texture pack on. Jukeboxes are also easy to see and differentiate from any other tool because they have a slot on top and they have a disc next to the slot signifying it's a jukebox. I think also a note block does not have that, which signifies it's a note block, not a jukebox. But another thing about the jukebox is that the sides are speakers, which also signifies that it's a jukebox, basically. Enchantment tables are high contrast too, but the insides are also quite different. We have some lapis lazuli here, and we have some iron sword, which we will enchant now. We will go on the enchantment table, and you can see that it's also high contrast. We've got the edges. The two boxes on the left signify where you put the tool and the lapis respectively. You can see where you can put the lapis because of the much higher outline now. So we will put some iron so we'll put the iron sword to the left now. This will show us dark grayed out enchantments because we don't have the appropriate lapis yet. But if we put some lapis in, we'll put all of them, the enchantments turn purple, but when you hover on top of them, they turn blue like the buttons in the menu. And the chests, you can also see they have a high contrast. I also missed out on showing you some light sources, so when you're in the dark, obviously you need some light sources. This is a normal campfire. It has red flames, as obvious, as campfires do. Oh jeez, jeez, I got scared. As campfires do, this has a red texture on the flame, which is also, the edges are more high contrasted. The logs are also in high contrast. But the soul campfire has blue flames, which are also high contrasted along with the logs. Similarly, the soul lantern is blue, but the edges have a white outline. But you can differentiate the soul lantern from the normal lantern because it is yellow instead of blue and the edges are black. And since it's in between them, we'll also cover the bell. The bell at the bottom is also very high contrast, which is basically signifies it's a bell. Obviously, you can ring it. There you go. So you can see that's a bell. So we will now look at the torches in the game. So you can clearly see the difference between a normal torch and a soul torch, because the normal torch has black edges, it has black outlines around the sides and not on the actual flame. The soul torch around the actual torch has kind of like white edges, so you can differentiate between those two. And it also kind of has like a dark solid outline where the flame, where the blue flame starts and where the kind of wood ends. Meanwhile, the redstone torch is much thicker than the previous torches. It has a giant ball that's red, signifying it's redstone, and it also has big, black, thick outlines around them. Okay, so similar to the iron bars and most of what I just showed you, the ladders also have black outlines around them, signifying and making it easy to spot. For example, I just climbed that, and they are currently on quartz blocks, which are white, so it's easy to see anyway. But if, for example, they were on some wooden planks, which are brown, they would be very hard to spot if the lads didn't have any outlines. More common to that problem are vines. Vines grow on trees, and trees are mostly green, so what better way to differentiate the leaves or the logs from the actual vines than putting edges and outlines around them. So the vines also have black outlines around each leaf, making them easier to spot. We're now moving on to one of the alternate dimensions in the game called the Nether. So the main block you will see around the Nether is the Netherrack. I didn't really change it because it's unique by itself. It's a recolored cobblestone texture, but it's red, and not many textures are like that within the game, so I didn't really change that because it's easy to spot. What I did change were the soul soil and the soul sand, of which I changed the contrast, making it higher, so it's easier to differentiate between the two. Soul sand has kind of different faces, and now they're easy to see because they were lower in contrast before. And soul soil, also is kind of like dark, but it's kind of like a, I don't know how to describe it. It's like an immovable brown waterfall. It's very easy to spot now. Moving on to the nether bricks, it's pretty much what I've done to the stone bricks, where I basically make the main part of the actual bricks kind of blurry, so that means losing the actual unimportant shades and making the outlines very dark and high contrast. So as you can see, it's easy to spot the nether bricks. These, I believe, are the cracked nether bricks. Of course, they are even higher in contrast with the actual cracks being black. And these must be the chiseled nether bricks, and they have a wither skeleton head in the middle, so they're much easier to spot now. Now this is the difference between the normal flames. So before I showed you the campfire flames, these are normal fires. So this is the soul fire, which is blue, and this is normal fire, which is red. Both of them, just like in the campfire, I changed the contrast to make them higher, so it's easy to spot. I also believe I changed the speed of the animation, making them much faster. And speaking of which, I also made the textures of the water and the lava faster too. Now, because the textures of the lava and the water move so fast, it should hopefully be easier to spot. So the water moves like that, it's really fast. I just go on top, and this is what the lava looks like. It flows slowly. When it actually flows down from a certain distance, it also flows slowly, but the texture itself moves fast, so you can actually see the difference between, for example, water and lava. When they are still, they also have a high speed with the texture, so they are still. It's kind of hard to see the texture moving really, but if you can see the difference, they do move a bit faster. Like the little details move faster than the original. Same with the lava, and you can also see in a second the particles that pop out also are bigger, so you can actually see that this is lava because water doesn't do that. Back to some blocks found in the nether. This is the black stone, which is kind of the cobblestone texture found in the original game, only a little bit zoomed in and painted black. This is also a high texture that I changed. It's now, I think, high to see. Similarly, this is glided blackstone. I also changed the texture, making it a high contrast. This is a polished blackstone, also a high contrast and hopefully easy to see. And these are the polished blackstone bricks. Also, obviously, I changed the outlines of the edges of the bricks. And similarly, this is the chiseled polished blackstone with a shape of I think it's an endermite in the middle, but I'm not quite sure because it's the nether, so it can't really be the endermite, can it? But you can obviously see the difference between this chiseled block and, for example, these stone chiseled bricks. When you eventually fire up a nether portal, you can also see the difference with the animation. This one has the nether portal is a faster animation, so you can see where the actual portal ends and when it finishes. So around it are obsidian blocks, which are still, they don't animate, but the nether portal itself animates and fast. Magma blocks, if you didn't know, also are animated. So if you see closely, the edges themselves are animated, but I made them faster so you can actually see that they are animated. It's like fire moving in and out. And I made them faster so it's easy to see. They are also based on the cobblestone texture, but made into the magma block. And I didn't have to change much because in themselves they were high contrast anyway. I did change the contrast of these blocks, however. This is the basalt or basalt and the polished basalt respectively. So this is the this is the normal basalt. These are a higher contrast, so it's the dark bits are darker, the bright bits are brighter, and I did the same to the polished basalt. We're now going to move on to the trees or the plants in the game, but we're gonna continue with the nether fungi first. This is the warped mycelium. Mycelium, sorry. This is what the mycelium looks like. Similar to the grass block, the sides have an outline which is much darker than the block below, and the block below is darker than the mycelium. So it's easy to spot the side and therefore the actual block itself. Similarly, the crimson mycelium is the same. It's a blood red texture on top, but the dark red means this is the netherrack, and the bright red on top means that this is the start of the crimson mycelium. I also changed the texture of the shroomlight, which I made a higher contrast. Now, what is a shroomlight? A shroomlight is a block that appears on top of a crimson tree. So a crimson tree is a tree that appears in the nether and it grows from crimson fungi. It looks like this when it grows, and it has crimson vines, I think they're called, which you can climb on top. Just like normal vines, they also have contrasting outlines around them. And when you cut down the logs of the crimson trees, this is what it looks like inside. The actual log, I'm not sure what it's called, but the centers have dark outlines to signify that it's an inside of the log. Similarly, I did the same to the warped tree, where everything's high contrast and the logs are also high contrast inside and outside. But we'll now move back into the normal world. We'll start off with the most popular tree in the game, the oak tree. This is what the oak tree looks like on its own. Obviously, it is high contrast. The textures of the leaves themselves have a lower resolution, so I think they're 6x6 now instead of being 12x12, so that makes it easier to spot because other leaves have different shapes and also different colors. And the insides of logs, just like mentioned before, also have solid outlines. You can also see here some of the things you can do with the wood. You can obviously turn the wood into doors, also high contrast. Planks, also high contrast, and you can see that each plank is separated by a dark outline between the two, and the actual planks also have a lower shading than before. This is what the stripped oak log looks like when you strip it off its bark, and similarly this is what the stairs look like on top of the oak planks. Signs also look very different and unique now, with the post holding the sign being darker and more high contrast, the outline of the sign itself being high contrast and obviously higher than the inside and being solid in color, and the center itself being blurry so that when text is on it, instead of seeing the plank it originally came from, you see the text better. This is what the fence looks like, similar to the plank, and this is what the trapdoor looks like, with the outlines made higher contrast and easier to see. Now I did the same with the birch trees. This is what the birch logs look like, and the trees themselves. This is what the things made out of the tree look like. So this is the trapdoor, the fence sign, stairs, the stripped log, and the door. Similarly, this is the spruce log and the spruce tree, obviously high contrast, and the leaves are also very differentiating between the previously mentioned leaves, as they are bigger blobs and smaller holes. And similarly, here are the high contrast things made out of the tree. The jungle tree has a high contrast. As you can also see, this is the vine, and the vine also has the outline like before mentioned. The inside of the log is a little bit different because obviously I couldn't really make the outlines similar inside because if you're colorblind, you can find it hard to see the difference between them. So what I made with this one is I made sort of the outside outline kind of very contrasty, and the inside you can see kind of that there's little dots at one point of the inside of the log. But again, things made out of the jungle tree are also high contrast. Here's the door, sign, and here's the trapdoor. Then again, this is the dark oak, again very dark indeed. These are the leaves, similar to the spruce but also quite different. And these are the high contrast things made out of the dark log. Door, trapdoor, and the sign. And I also forgot to mention the acacia, but it works the same. It's orange though inside. I did make some demos for the things made out of the warped wood and the crimson wood. So I think this is dark, so this is crimson. But obviously, like before, dark texture. And these aren't bricks, it's just shorter planks, specifically the crimson ones. But similarly, these are shorter warped planks, and this is the door that's made out of warped wood, sign, and the warped trapdoor. Now if we go upstairs here on this high contrast ladder, you will see some of the plants that I also made high contrast, or at least attempted to. This is a sapling for the oak log. Well, it doesn't really say, so just look at them. Most of them I did do my best to make them high contrast. The nether fungi I did make much larger, and I did add some outlines to signify that they are fungi. This is the crimson fungi because it's red on the inside, it's much bigger and there's a white outline. This is the warped fungi because its stem has a white outline and not the actual head. So it's the opposite of the crimson fungi. Normal fungi found in the normal world, so the mushrooms, they don't have any outline, but they are very high texture and they are also much bigger. This does make it hard to pick up though, because even though the textures are bigger, the hitboxes stay the same. So the hitboxes which allow you to actually interact with certain blocks and items are the same size as the original mushrooms within the original game, so do be mindful of that. The cacti and the dead bushes are also high in contrast. Similarly, the grass also have very dark outlines and edges, and similar to the mushrooms, the flowers, most of the flowers are much bigger, but then again the hitboxes stay the same, so be careful of that. But similar to the normal grass, there's seagrass in the water, and the seaweed are also high in contrast and they have an outline around them. So now you can tell the difference between water, other things inside water, and the stuff like the weed and the seagrass. Right, I just lost some health there because I forgot I am in... I forgot I'm in survival mode. But speaking of which, I will now have to turn the hotbar on. The hotbar is very different. I changed a lot in the hotbar. So the hotbar is what you see that's not part of the game, but it's part of the screen. So it's what you see, but not what the player himself sees if it was like real life. So that means that your hand is part of the hotbar, although you can't really change that. I did change the plus in the middle, that's called the crosshair, and the thing at the bottom, which is the, well, that's the hotbar. It's a GUI mainly, or the HUD that's on the whole screen. The plus in the middle is the crosshair, and it's now 3 times the size. I made it thicker so that it's easy to see where the center is. At the bottom you see the hotbar boxes. Now in the original, every box was grey, and when you hover on a certain box it turned white, but all of the boxes had a certain shade kind of system. Now all of the boxes have a high contrast, one single color around them. All of the boxes are orange, but when you hover on them it turns white, so it's a higher contrast. What is also a higher contrast is the XP bar, which is total black when it's empty and a solid green when it's filled, and that also works with other health bars when you, for example, fight enemies. What is also high contrast is the hearts. The hearts are solid red when you actually have them, but when they're gone, as you can see, they're black, total black. So you can now see the difference between which hearts you have left and which ones you don't. Before they had shades and you could have mixed them up. The hunger bar, which is on the bottom right, was also super difficult to see, as the hunger bar was indicated by the amount of chicken drumsticks that were eaten in the actual bar. So if there was only a little chicken drumsticks left, that means your hunger bar was very low. If there's a lot of them, that means that the hunger bar was full. But the chicken drumsticks, if there's half of them, then there's half of the chicken drumstick, which is very hard to see. And if they're gone, they're also very difficult to see. Now, however, if you try to see how much hunger you have left, now it's much easier as it's high contrast. The yellow bit indicates how much you have left, and the black bit is how much you have gone. As you can see, because I had some fall damage, it's kind of shaking and slowly going down. So it's now easy to see that the yellow bits are starting to get more black as I wait. I will also going to show you another thing made out of these certain woods. So each boat that you spawn into the game has a the edges of each boat have a... oh jeez, I just got stuck. The edges of the inside and of the planks have a higher contrast, as previously mentioned with the other tools. Here is also a fishing rod. When you actually have items in your inventory, if they are dark in color, they will have a bright, typically white, edge around them, which should make it easy for you to find in the inventory and in your hotbar. And if they are bright in color, they will have a darker outline. This is a fishing rod that I'm holding, and if you've played the original game, you know that it's very hard to fish because you have to look at the bait to see when it goes down. When it goes down, you can pull it to actually get a fish. Now, when you actually take your fishing rod and you put it in water, you can see that the bait is much bigger and it has a black outline, so it's much easier to see. We're just going to wait for a fish to come by. You can also Okay, and we've got a fish. We're just going to fish again. The way you see that a fish is coming closer is by bubbles coming near, but it's hard to see that, currently at least. So you can also use your hearing to tell that a fish has come, but also because the bait is now bigger, it goes down and it's very easier and it's much easier to see. So we're just going to do that again, and you'll see when it comes down. Just in a and it went down, and there we go. There we have 3 lovely fish, which we'll throw back in the water. Another thing on the hotbar is the water bar. If we go down inside the water, you can see the difference between normal stone and granite, for example, like I mentioned before. But on the actual hotbar, you can see the bubbles. So the bubbles are how much oxygen you have left. In the original game, they were hollow, which meant that they were very hard to spot. But now, I have filled them on the inside, so now it's easy to see the bubbles and how much you have left. As we came out of the water, I will also explain some blocks found in the water, for example in the ocean, in water temples. This is another light source, which is the sea lantern. Prismarine is a high contrast, and it's much brighter, I believe. And that does have an animation, so as you can see, it goes a bit darker sometimes, like so. These are prismarine bricks, so it is one line at the top and it kind of splits to 2 coming to the bottom, and there is also a solid outline around each block of the prismarine bricks. The dark prismarine is obviously dark. It is like a grid, kind of. It's dark, very dark green, and it's also high contrast. Sponges are also high contrast. I think I changed them to look as they looked in the old version of Minecraft. I think this is the old texture. I'm not quite sure, but it should be easier to see. As you can see now, the wet sponge has water dripping out of it, and if you can see the water, that's because the water droplets are much bigger. The water droplets are also like that when you stand up below a block that has water on top of it. So it also has big water droplets, and similarly lava should have the same, also big lava droplets. Well, it should have, because I've showed you that. But from the water we move on to redstone and redstone tools. This is a lectern, obviously much simpler to see because it is a high contrast and it has loads of outlines around it. This is the target block, so unlike in the original game where these squares around the other squares are different shades of red and white, the shapes have solid colors, so it's solid red, solid white, and around the red lines they have smaller red outlines to make it easier to differentiate between the shapes. The sides and the top and bottom of the observer also have a high contrast. Similarly, so do the hoppers. The hoppers also have a kind of like a bright outline around them. Now, respectively, this is the dropper and this is the dispenser. You can tell the difference between each of them by seeing let's say the top first. This is the dispenser stop, which is a circle, whereas in the dropper it's more like a plus. The dispenser has a significant face because it has like a haircut, eyes, and like a smile. But in the dispenser, it has a somewhat shocked face. And around it, you can also see that there's no more shades. It's just simple colors and high textures. This is what the node block looks like. So the node block has nodes on the sides and the top, whereas compared to the jukebox, here is the top of the jukebox with a disc on top and a slot next to it, and around the sides there are big, massive speakers. So this is how you tell the difference between the note block and the jukebox. This is the lever, and this is the pistons. They might look similar. This is the sticky piston, and this is the normal piston. But if you actually lower them, you can see a big difference. It's very hard for me to see the difference between a normal piston and a sticky piston in the normal game, but with this texture pack it's so much easier to spot. This is what the piston looks like in the B.A.P. As you can see, there's nothing on it, and a sticky piston has a big green splat on it, which is basically a slime ball stuck on top of it to make it sticky. I really like this one. This is one of my favorite parts of the blind accessibility pack, because this is a big difference. You can see a massive difference between the normal piston and the sticky piston. Another big difference I made was the redstone lamp. This is it on and this is it off. It's much darker when it's off, but both have similar shapes overall. The tripwire is very easy to see because it is, oh geez, my eyes just went weird. On a white surface, the tripwire looks to have black lines, but if it was on a dark surface, the blacks would be kind of invisible because obviously it would be on a black surface, but then they would be replaced by white line. Good morning, baby. Sorry, I'm recording. I'll talk to you when I'm done, okay? If you use redstone, you most likely use daylight sensors, but it's also very hard to spot the difference between the daylight sensor and the daylight sensor when it's turned on or set to nighttime. This is what the nighttime sensor looks like. It kind of has like a yellowish kind of center with a black box surrounding that yellow thing, and then 4 dark squares on each side of that center with a white outline on each little square. Then the opposite is happening to the nighttime sensor. So instead of the yellow, the center is now blue with a white outline instead of the black outline. And the little 4 circles on each side of the center are now bright with a black outline. So that's how you tell the difference between the nighttime sensor and the daylight sensor. I very much like this too. You can also struggle when riding or building rails. This is the minecart, which has a white edge around it and a black edge inside. The rails are also, they look kind of similar to the original, but they are also high contrast, so they're easier to see. I do believe I also made them at least the unactivated, for example, detector rails, the activator rails, and the powered rails. When they are turned off, they have a solid, very dark red color. But when you turn them on, if I find the switch, I don't think there is one. Let me just write this on top of that. So if you briefly saw, the dark red turns into normal red. If you saw for a split second. So that's the difference. It makes it easier to see when the powered rails are on and off. If you want to play Minecraft, you will definitely use TNT. But how can you use them if you can't see them? Well, I made the blocks themselves a higher contrast. As you can see, the actual TNT themselves are a single color, but the outlines are a darker color. The TNT and the white background is also easier to read. And the top also has, I can't really show you right now, but if you, oh, I can zoom in with the Optifine. Oh bloody hell. If you look closely, you can also see that the top is also a high contrast, and the fuse also has a white outline around it. We are going to make it explode because the blast, the clouds made from the blast, I also changed, I basically gave them much more noise. And by noise, I don't mean more annoying sound, noise in terms of graphics. So noise like if you were, for example, watching an old TV that wasn't plugged in, it would have white noise. So I added noise to the clouds, so if it explodes now, you can see that the blast is kind of more visible. Now, how can we discuss redstone without actually discussing the redstone powder? While before it was different dots and it was more noisy, just like I mentioned with the TNT, now it's a single color, and this is what it looks like when it's like a cross section. This is when it's on its own, like a little dot, and this is what it looks like when it's plugged into other redstones. It's a single color and it glows red when it's activated, similar to the powered rails. This is the comparator, also in dark contrast, with a dark contrast I mean, and this is the repeater, also with a dark contrast. Now, I don't know about you if you are blind yourself, but I am blind and I often want to make adventure maps. And when you make adventure maps, you find very common that people use command blocks. Now, command blocks are used very often because they make certain rules or they change certain things in the adventure map to make it more interesting. But command blocks look the same all the time, and depending on the setting, they also might have a certain change to the texture, but it's very subtle in the original game. I made it so it's not subtle. This is what the command block looks like originally. It flashes here to signify that it's a command block, I believe, and on here it has little blue dots to signify that it is an impulse command block. Now, if we, for example, change to game mode creative, we can actually set it from unconditional to conditional, and that will put a big C next to the blue dots. Now, the difference between an impulse command block and a chain command block is that the dots are now green instead of blue, and you can also see the difference because there is a moving chain on each side, on most sides of the command block if you are colorblind and you can't see the difference between the blue and the green. So there's also a moving chain to signify that it's a command block. That is a chain command block, sorry. You can also see the difference between the chain command block and the repeat command block, because there's also one more command block, and the difference between these and this one is that the dots are red. I think they're red. They look green to me, but I swear I made them red. But on each side there's also a kind of like a looping circled arrow. Lastly, in the redstone section, I will also show you the trapdoors. Also high contrast, and they are made of iron. Weird. For some reason this side is less high contrasted than this side. The point is that it is supposed to be easier to see. Sorry for boring you, but if you are interested, then I do hope that this helps. If it does help, please leave a like so I know that it did help. These are wool. I made them higher contrast while keeping the colors of the wool themselves, and they should hopefully be easy to recognize. Also, the way you recognize the difference between wool and, for example, terracotta, concrete, and concrete powder is that terracotta is a bit duller than the wool, and it doesn't have all of those little noise grains. Concrete is a bit darker and a bit more of a solid color than terracotta, and the concrete powder is just like concrete, except for the fact that it has a somewhat grainy texture, and it does have a similar texture to sand in the original game, but like I said before, sand and redstone are the only very high quality textures that I put in the texture pack, so this does not look like sand anymore, it looks like a very grainy concrete. Now you can also compare sand, which is a very high resolution, to gravel. Gravel has a grey, grainy texture. It is not a high resolution, but it is very grey and sort of blurry when you get close, so you can see the difference between the other blocks. Now, I've spoken about farmland before, but I haven't actually shown you the difference between each crop and crop level, because I changed that too. These are wheat seeds. So when you grow wheat seeds, this is stage 1, when you actually start growing them. They have a white outline around them. This is stage 2, when they're slightly bigger. Stage 3, and then stage 4, they are all white in the outline, and there is also, if you can see, there is also a red kind of cross or grid on top of them to signify that they are finished growing. Similarly, these are beetroot seeds, and they get stage 2, they get bigger, and they are biggest now, and there is also a dark red grid to signify that they are ready to take out. Hay bales also have a high contrast, as you can see. Now, just before we move on to the next part of the demo, I will also quickly mention the other dimension which you can travel to, which is the end dimension. Like previously mentioned, the stone bricks have a high contrast with outlines around them. So similarly, here is the purple pillar. Here are the purple bricks, high contrast edges. These are the end bricks, very high contrast edges. These are the end stones, also high contrast. And the end portal, so the end portal is much more blurry, I believe, which should make it easier to see the inside and the outside, so that includes the ender eyes, and the end portal frames are also very high in contrast. I also mentioned terracotta previously, but this is glazed terracotta. I didn't really change those because, similar to glass, stained glass, they were made specifically to look how they look. I might have added some high contrast, but I didn't change much. So this is what they look like. You may notice, however, I did change bricks, making them a higher contrast and tweaking the outlines of the bricks themselves, which hopefully are better to see and easier to see. But now come the paintings. The paintings I changed drastically. To make them easier to see, I changed most of them by making them either a high contrast of the original, or I made them simpler and I made the art myself. This is a cave called Thor's Cave in England, and because it's a big painting and you can actually get closer to see the details and it's not too low contrast, it's got different colors, it's easy to see. Another big painting is this one, which is in the original game, but I believe I made it a high contrast. And this is a castle from a we don't need to know where it's from. The point is, it's higher contrast, so it's much easier to see. Some more paintings. This is another big one I made myself. This is of a ship with simpler graphics. This is rock. This is a pirate ship. This one I didn't change because I thought it was high contrasty enough, similar to this one, although I believe I made this one's contrast a bit higher. This one I also made myself. I changed the previous painting to this one, where I basically made trees and I made like big, well, small red eyes in the center, but it's a nice thing to look at. You might also remember a skull painting, which is also a kind of like a large painting of a skull in the original game. This is that painting, but I made it easier to see. This is also one of the larger paintings, but it is now of a little dog on a mountain. If you get close, you can actually see the dog and the outline of it. This is some random painting I found on Google. It is free, royalty free, so I decided to use it, but tweak a little bit. It's still very high contrast, so it's easier to see. And this is also in the original game, but I made the background very blurry, so you can actually see the actual characters. Now onto the smaller paintings. This is originally in the game. I didn't really tweak it apart from changing the contrast to high. This is a logo of The Blind Life, which is a channel covering blind content, reviewing blind equipment, talking about blind problems in their life, and it's made by Sam, its host. Sam is a great person. He helped me a few times, and he even made a review of this texture pack, reviewing it and basically letting others know about it. So thanks, Sam. Because he reviewed it, this is a kind of like a little Easter egg in the paintings. This next painting is squares with a blue square in the middle, and that's basically the floor of the temple when you actually go inside. This is another original painting that's still in the original game. I think I did change the contrast to high in that one too. This is a custom-made painting that I made myself. It's a creeper head which has a blue background and a brighter blue outline around the face itself. This is also in the original. I think I either may or may not have changed the contrast to high. And this is another painting, specifically of me a few years ago, just as a little Easter egg. The last two paintings that are left to show are the 1x2 paintings. So this is the original Minecraft painting of like a sort of Pinocchio or a character from a video game, and this one I added myself, and hopefully it's more contrast and better to see. Now we'll move on to specific items. Also, just because I have it now for some reason. This is the barrier block if you ever use it. It's a solid red with a white edge around and inside it, so you actually see the barrier block when you actually hold it. When you don't hold it, so I just removed it from my hand, it's going to disappear soon, and it's gone. But a more important bit is the compass and clock. We're going to take the compass, and we're going to take the clock, and we'll see how it works. I'll just get out of the door. So this is what the clock looks like. What's in the middle is what time it is. So the time is just above midday because the sun is above the middle. But if we were to change the time to, for example, time set night, the time changes, and you can see that it says, or it was about to say sunset in big contrasty letters. We will change to, so we changed to time 6000, and it changed to midday. Now it says clearly midday with high contrast letters. The compass is easier to navigate now because it's now big, much bigger. The actual red needle is also bigger, and it is now a solid color, solid three colors, grey, red and black, whereas the other one was much smaller and very hard to see. Various tools, like I previously mentioned, also have a higher contrast and a white outline around them if they have a bright color. So it's a poisoned arrow or a arrow with an effect. This is a crossbow, totem of undying. Don't really think that has an outline, but I did make it a higher contrast. This is a normal arrow, and this is a bow, which should be clear to see. Other tools look like so, and they have an outline to make it easy to see the tool. The netherite tools also look slightly different because instead of being brown, which may confuse you for the wooden tools, they are a gradient of red and yellow, although I would need to experiment with that. Also, do bear in mind the enchanted tools. So this is, enchanted items. This is the enchanted apple. This is the enchanted book. Notice how the enchanted textures actually move. They are much bigger and they're easier to now see. Whether you, another player, or a different mob is wearing armor, you can clearly see the type of armor they are wearing by the special characteristics on the actual armor. So for example, this is leather armor. It has buttons on them and it has a simple texture without many details around them or on them. Chainmail armor has black edges and outlines on each different hole, so it has black and white sort of look. It kind of looks checkered. The iron armor has 2 lines on the chest, so it kind of looks like an equal sign, and it is white and in high contrast. The diamond armor has little lines and outlines kind of around the bigger outlines. The golden armor has lots of little dots, and the netherite armor has more shading and has different gradients of yellow. Now when it comes to mobs, when you actually are in creative mode, you can spawn them, but being blind, you may find it difficult to see the difference between certain eggs. However, if you can see some color, now it will be easier to spot the difference. I made the eggs larger. They now look more like balls, or sort of like Pokeballs, but with another kind of like line with dots around them. So this is the texture for a zombie spawn egg. This is another one for a creeper. As you can see, it's darker now. This is a texture for, I believe, an Enderman. This is another texture for another mob spawn egg, so this is specifically a pig spawn egg. This one is a, let me just zoom out, this one is a sheep spawn egg. Then this is a villager spawn egg. You get the gist. So we will spawn in a zombie mob. Now if you can see, you might notice that I put a little more grain in the actual textures of the mobs, which hopefully would make them easier to see. Similarly, I did the same to the creeper, adding a little more grains. And if he actually looks at me, you can see that his face is totally black. It's not a shade, different shades of black, it's totally black. This is an Enderman with very purple looking eyes. A pig looks similar, but with more grain. Just look at me. Can you look at me, please? Oh, no. Okay. Escaped, but you get the idea. This is a sheep. It also should have a more grainy texture. Similarly, a villager, a pillager, a witch, and a wolf. Now I would like you to see the difference between the villager, pillager, and the witch. If you can see, the villager has its eyes kind of derpy. It's looking like its eyes are looking outside. However, because the pillager and the witch are more evil, they need to focus on their enemies. That's why their eyes are a different color. They're red in color, and they are actually facing to the center instead of the outside. The witch's eyes, you can also see, are facing inwards. And similarly, the wolf, when it's angry, it also changes its face. This is a skeleton, also with a high contrast and more grainy. And compare that to the wither skeleton, where it's holding a dark sword with a white area around it. If it looks at me, you can see that its eyes are more white and they're actually angry looking, so it's easy to see them. I think the last mob I wanted to show you is the ghast. So when you actually spawn in the ghast, you can see that its face is much bigger and its mouth, I think, looks the same. but when it is provoked, or let's just open one barrier. Oh, okay, I think I know how to make it cry. So when it cries, when it's provoked, it's angry. And when it's angry, it opens its mouth, but it might be too small to notice in the in the actual game. So now... Oh no. Oh, bloody... Oh. Okay, basically when it opens its mouth gets much bigger. So it's easy to see. But that concludes our demo, finally. So sorry for exhausting you, sorry for boring you, but I hope it helps. I did make this to hopefully help you see how helpful or how not helpful the texture pack is. Now, if it's not helpful, then it probably is because I worked on it alone. And again, if you or someone you know is talented enough to help out with either programming, making the texture pack even better, or even making this texture pack into a mod or a data pack, I highly recommend you please contact me, because the more blind people are able to play, the better. The accessibility in any game is very important, and the more people are aware of this, the more people can play the game. Again, if you do like the look of this texture pack, I highly recommend you check out the description below, where you can find a link to the official page, where you can also read up a bit more about certain things, and you can download the texture pack there. Hi, me again. In the beginning of the video I said I would tell you why I didn't record consistently and I didn't upload consistently. I didn't do that because I forgot, but here's the answer. For me, life was quite stressful throughout the period where I wasn't uploading. It's very hard for me to upload because my computer is quite bad. The program keeps crashing, the program keeps not responding apparently, and then I have to do things all over again. I have to save my save file all the time, every few seconds, every few changes I do, and it's very frustrating. My computer's really bad. It actually got corrupted a few weeks ago, so like a Windows guy person had to fix it and move my profile onto another profile and then delete the old one. So I need a new computer, but that's not the important bit. What is important is that I uploaded this video. So I hope this helps. Because of all the bad things that were happening, I also lost motivation to make videos. I did make TikToks, but it's not enough. Like, I promised I was going to make a Gaming Blind series, Gaming Blind videos, accessibility reviews, but I don't do that often. I will try my best, but I need motivation and it's really hard to do that, but again, I'll try my best. So sorry about not uploading, but thanks for sticking to the end of this video. I hope this video helped, and yeah, thanks. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you didn't like it, please dislike it. Comment your favorite part about the texture pack. You can also, I highly recommend you giving me feedback so I know what I can improve on or what is to be changed or needed. Please subscribe to my channel to find out more about blind gaming, more blind accessibility, to see which games are accessible for you or not, to basically hear about any of my blind content coming up, and see my content in general, whether it's about being blind or not. So please subscribe and press the bell notification if you would like that. So thanks for watching, and thanks for letting me waste your time. Bye bye.